How we doing, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, here with my good friend, Mr. Brett Bandick. How you doing, boss?
Do good, baby. I'm ready to rock and roll in this segment. We've been holding this off for a little while, but it's gonna be a good time. I'm ready to throw my top 10 out there. Let's do
Yes,
it, man.
the segment that Brett is talking about, we are talking about NBA centers all-time rankings with the NBA recently ending and the Denver Nuggets beating the Miami Heat. And according to Skip Bayless, one of the worst closeout games of all time. I hate to agree with him. I do to a level. But we're talking about just all of it, the entire package of the best centers that ever played this great game. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to throw my top 10 player for player at Brett. He is going to rebuttal if he doesn't agree with it, and we're going to have some great convo. So without further ado, we're starting from the top and we're going down. So we are starting at number one. I have a feeling this is going to be a universal agreement. Got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at number one. Formerly Lou Alcindor. Six-time world champion. 5 with the Los Angeles Lakers alongside Earvin Magic Johnson. 1 alongside Oscar Robertson with the Milwaukee Bucks. Up until last season, the all-time NBA points leader. And a patented killer shot, the sky hook, which that man shot like a free throw with that kind of confidence and that kind of accuracy. He is my number one. Bretsky, what do you got to add on Kareem?
Well, the skyhook, we'll dive into that a little bit later. But this man has 19 All-Star games. 19.
Yeah.
19 All-Star games. No, he's my number one. He's your number one. Going from the collegiate level to the pro level, he is the all-time pro. No, I'm not even debating this. He is my number one all-time center ever.
Yeah, and I do want to make a mention before we move it along to another player. I think this goes without saying also the most decorated college player in NCAA history. High school legend, Powell Memorial High School, New York City. The guy was just that of legend even before he was a pro. Even before he was in college, the guy was a legend. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, undeniably number one. And I'll even take it a step further. He is the second greatest basketball player of all time. The only person I put ahead of him is Michael Jordan. And I'll tell you what, if people argue that Jabbar's the GOAT, that one I don't feel all that comfortable arguing even in favor of Jordan, because there are enough checks on this man's resume where you can say he's the GOAT and you cannot look foolish if you say that.
That's a whole nother topic. We'll talk about that another time. Like the GOAT topic. I mean, we've talked about it before, but
it's an add-on. I'm talking about this man. He's a top 2 all-time NBA player.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%.
At number 2, I smell a disagreement coming. Fellow Laker, Shaquille O'Neal.
Number 2? Number 2?
Number 2.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna let you rag on him first, and then I'm gonna tell you why he's my number 2.
Well, listen, we're both going to agree on our top 5 picks, but it's gonna be flip flopped. Like, it doesn't really matter what order it's in. We're still gonna have the same top 5. I'm actually gonna put Bill Russell at number 2. Number 1, 11 championships in 13 seasons. kind of hard to. It's very hard to argue with that.
Let's talk about Bill Russell for a second, since you're talking about him. He's my number
Yeah,
5.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You're talking about him. I'm listening.
I mean, the main thing is 11 championships in 13 seasons in the 60s. Granted, it's the 60s, but there are a lot of other players in the 60s, late 50s that put up those kind of points. Wilt Chamberlain, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I can honestly, Mike can, oh my God. You know what I mean? So it's like the list goes on there. But Bill Russell, 11 championships in 13 seasons. I don't care what you say. He's number 2, bottom line. Shaq, he.
Hold your thought. Hold on. You talked about Russell. I might as well talk about Russell too before we move back to Shaq.
Please.
Okay. On no planet can I put Bill Russell ahead of, I don't know, I'm looking at the list in front of me, at least 7 guys that are better scorers than him. Yes.
7 guys.
Look at the numbers, Brett. Bill Russell was not a two-way player. He was not an offensive-minded player. One of the greatest defenders of all time, undeniably the greatest winner in the sport. But Bill Russell's offense pales in comparison to Hakeem Olajuwon, Wilt Chamberlain, Shaquille O'Neal, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, just to name a few, and Jabbar. The greatest winner of all time, undeniably. But with all due respect to the late, great Bill Russell, he did not play in the golden eras for that position. He doesn't have the offensive pedigree on my list to be ranked at 2. And to be honest with you, we can always play the what if game. If this guy played in that era and that guy played against this guy and all this other stuff, we can't do that. But one thing I will say is I am not convinced that Bill Russell would have that same success consistently against some of these other players. He has his place in history, as it is well deserved. Greatest winner in NBA history. He's my number 5. He's your number 2. Let's get back to Shaq. I have Shaq as my number 2 for a litany of reasons. The biggest reason is in my lifetime, when we're talking about people's primes, no other player in their prime has been more dominant than Shaquille O'Neal other than Michael Jordan. 3 consecutive finals MVPs. Made the NBA Finals in only his 3rd year in the league alongside Penny Hardaway. Did get dusted up by a veteran Houston Rockets team. What else can we put on Shaq's resume? He is a 4-time champ, 3 in a row with the Lakers, 3-time league finals MVP, 1-time league MVP. What else can we put on his resume? The only guy whose team took out Michael Jordan after Jordan won a championship. He also did that. Just ferocity around the rim. I've never seen a center dominate at that level of that physical nature in my lifetime at their peak like this guy did.
Well, Rich, you said it. I mean, physical nature. The guy was dominant around the rim. The guy can pull down a backboard, break backboards. He changed the game as far as changing the backboards.
He also ran the floor when he was a younger guy.
Yeah, he did. He did. But I will give you a guy that Shaq's your number 2, correct?
Shaq is my number 2.
Okay. No, I give Shaq all the credits. It's hard for me to give him that much credit when he was playing with Kobe. You can shake your head all you want, but he played with Kobe, and he is Jordan 2.0.
Let me ask you a question. Before anybody knew Kobe Bryant, was Shaquille O'Neal already a bona fide superstar?
He's a superstar? No, he was a star.
He
He was a
wasn't.
star.
He wasn't a superstar in Orlando.
He was a star. He was not a superstar.
Oh, Brett,
Because
Brett, either you
no,
don't remember history or you have given this
I
lady.
do remember history because Penny was along with him. So was Nick Anderson. So was Dennis Scott. I remember that. So was Horace Grant. Like, he wasn't a bona fide superstar. He was a star. Don't get me wrong. He was a star. Shake your head all you want, dude. I'm gonna put Hakeem Olajuwon above Shaq, and on any list. On any list. Shake your head all you want, dude. I'm putting. Well, actually, you know what? My list here. Yes, I am putting Hakeem above Shaq, but I'm putting Wilt Chamberlain above all those guys. Wilt Chamberlain is my number 3.
I'm still mind blown with this disrespect to Shaq.
No disrespect. He's still in my top 5. It's no disrespect.
But Britsky, to not say that he was a superstar in Orlando. That's why he got that massive contract from the Lakers. That was the biggest free agent signing in our lifetime prior to LeBron.
I get that.
He was a superstar, not some freaking. No, dude, he was a superstar. I can't even entertain that.
Well, Wilt's my number 3. Wilt's my number 3. Only player in the league to do 100 points in a single game. He averaged 50.4 points per game in the early 60s, which is never going to be compared to. No, Wilt's my number 3. But Shaq and Hakeem, they're flip-flopping 4 and 5. But I'm still going to put Hakeem above Shaq. Hakeem, the Dream, above Shaq. Number 4.
Why do you have Wilt above these guys? I want to hear this. Why is Wilt above Hakeem, and why is Wilt above Shaq? I want to hear this.
I just told you.
No, you told me.
He's the only player in history to have 100 points a game.
And what was
He averaged 50.4 points per game in the early 60s. 2 or 3 years, 50.4 points per game.
And to speak on that 100-point game, do you know what that would translate into the time of the Kobe Bryant era? Just putting it in perspective.
Probably about 50, 55.
I listen. The guy's a legend. I get it. He could never beat Bill Russell. He could never beat the Celtics. He also lost 2 different times in the finals to the New York Knicks. I don't see on what planet this man is better than Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon. What part of this man's game could Olajuwon not handle?
Can Olajuwon not handle?
Yeah. Olajuwon's the all-time blocks leader. Bill Russell handled him rather well.
That makes my point. So why would you put Bill Russell above Shaq?
Because Shaq's a better athlete, and Shaq would dunk on his head. That's why I would put Shaq ahead of Bill Russell. Superior athlete. And he would also body Jabbar. The only reason I have Jabbar up there is because his resume is too deep to even consider putting anybody ahead of him. But you're going to tell me with a straight face that lanky Jabbar is going to guard Shaq on defense, dude? Shaq would body him.
No, I know Shaq. I know Shaq would body him, but Kareem has the shot. He has the skyhook. He has all that. He has the free throw shooting. Shaq never had that. Hence, hack a Shaq.
And Wilt
everybody would purposely foul Shaq.
And Wilt did? Wilt was a horrible free throw shooter, too.
Compared to Shaq?
They were both terrible, dude.
Compared to Shaq? Come on.
They were both terrible.
Come on.
They were both
Shaq was the worst. Shaq was the worst.
They were both terrible.
Hence, hack a Shaq. Shaq was the worst.
Terrible. They were both terrible.
What else you got?
Wow.
All right, come on, keep going. Come on.
Well, as I already stated,
don't lose your focus.
Bill Russell is my 5. Hakeem Olajuwon is my 3 after Shaquille O'Neal. And the main reason why he is there is because I view him as a better athlete than Wilt Chamberlain. I also grade these guys on the competition they played against. And I think Hakeem Olajuwon played in the golden era of centers. Same could be said for Shaquille O'Neal as well as Jabbar. Jabbar's better than Russell. Jabbar's better than Wilt. The footwork was phenomenal underneath the rim. Similar to Patrick Ewing, Hakeem didn't truly have that real number 2 until later in his career. That number 2 was Clyde Drexler. But on an individual basis, I only have 2 guys ahead of Hakeem, and it's Shaq and Jabbar. He did get the better of a very young Shaq. But again, if we're talking prime for prime, no. No. He caught Shaq when he was young. Still top 3 in my opinion. Number 1 overall draft pick in the famous draft, which saw the Portland Trailblazers manage to take Sam Bowie in between 2 of the most prolific players of that era. Olajuwon went 1, Jordan went 3. The Portland Trailblazers decided to go with Sam Bowie. Yeah. You ask a Houston fan if they got it right, they're going to all say yes. You ask a Chicago fan if they got it right, of course they're going to say yes. But, man, those Portland Trailblazers, my God, to take Sam Bowie over Michael Jordan. You could have had Jordan and Drexler together.
I know. I agree. I agree with that.
Unbelievable. But, at the time, it wasn't viewed as it was still viewed as a big man's game. But, my God, what a strikeout in terms of draft that was. But, so you say you have Wilt over Hakeem. It could be a debate for days. But, again, I don't see how Chamberlain stops Hakeem. I think Hakeem could match him on defense. And I think Hakeem has the footwork to get Wilt in probable foul trouble.
Well, I mean, Hakeem played in a different era, different time.
A better era and a better time.
Different set of rules. He I'm not going to say he revolutionized the game, but he was damn near close to it.
The best footwork in the history of all.
Oh my God, he was brutal, absolutely brutal.
I cannot put Wilt above him. He can't do it.
He's probably the only player in NBA history to have a MVP season, along with a Defensive Player of the Year and a Finals MVP.
Michael, Jeffrey, Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan did that too. But it's crazy. I think they're the only 2 players. Correct me if I'm wrong. They're probably the only 2 players in the NBA to actually make that happen. I could be wrong. I don't know, but
they didn't have Finals MVPs during Bill Russell's era. That's number 1.
Yeah. I mean, but I got Will at 3. I have Hakeem at 4, and Shaq at 5. Those are my top 5.
At number 6,
I'm going to put Hakeem above Shaq for a number of reasons. I mean, we can all both agree Shaq was very dominant, down low, very powerful. Hakeem brought that, the footwork, the agility, the steals, the assists. He's a leader in blocks, and his free throws. It's just all of us can all agree that Shaq's biggest flaw was his free throws. He never exceeded expectations when it came to winning a game in less than 4 minutes, making free throws.
That's not entirely true.
Oh, come on.
No, Brett.
Hack-a-Shack. Come on. Everybody knew what to do the last 5 minutes of the game.
So you're telling me.
Foul Shaq. Because he can't make free throws.
So you're telling me that during the Lakers era, in the playoffs, that Shaquille O'Neal never made tough free throws when he had to. Is that what you're saying?
Not like Hakeem Olajuwon did.
Brett.
Not like that. Not like that, dude.
History.
Not like that. Not like that.
I can't.
I know you can. I know you can. Go ahead and keep going. This is fun. Come on, baby.
It's not.
What else you got?
This ain't fun. This is ignorant.
What else you got? Who's your number 4?
I can't get off this Shaq topic. We got an hour. I can't get off this.
Who's your number 4?
I can't get off this right now. I'm staying here for a minute. I'm staying here.
Okay, go for it.
You got 2 guys ahead of Shaq that got less championships. That's number 1. Wilt has 2. Olajuwon has 2. Shaq has 4.
Mm-hmm.
Shaq has more Finals MVPs than both of them.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about Olajuwon's passing prowess over Shaq. For the career, they both average 2 assists a game. Olajuwon is only a couple of decimal points ahead of Shaq in that regard. Rebounding, they're about even. Shaq has them on points per game. They each have a league MVP.
Mm-hmm.
God. This ain't... Oh, man. I'm mind blown, Brett. I'm mind blown. You grew up in the 90s, and you're giving more credit to guys you haven't seen play. I'm fucking mind blown. Mind blown.
It is what it is, Reg.
So you're giving a guy that you never saw play more credit than a guy that you did. Make sense. Wilt Chamberlain. Bill Russell. Bill Russell.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Russell is a better player than Shaquille O'Neal.
Sure.
And you mean it.
Yeah.
And you mean it. And you're going to tell me that the athletes in that era could stand up to the guys in the 90s. And you mean it.
It's a different era, dude. You can't compare. The fact is that stats are stats, championships are championships. Bottom line.
But if you can't compare, you're justifying putting a guy above another guy when you know that the other guy played in a better era. You know this.
A better era or a different era? A better era or a different era?
Hold on. Why is Michael Jordan the GOAT when he played in the same fucking era as Shaq? But a guy in the 60s that played center gets more credit than a guy that played center in the 90s? That makes no fucking sense.
We're not even talking about that. We're not even talking about Jordan and being the GOAT. We're not even talking about that.
But it's the same era. You can't have it both ways. What era is better, the 90s or the 60s?
But you're not okay with me saying that Hakeem Olajuwon is better than Shaq, even though they played in the same fucking era that Jordan did. You're not okay with me saying that.
Shaq's the second most dominant player in both our lifetimes. That is not up for debate, especially if we're talking about the prime. That's not up for debate. 2 dudes in our lifetimes three-peated, and 2 dudes in our lifetimes.
I saw all of them play.
2 dudes in our lifetimes got Finals MVPs 3 consecutive years. One's named Michael Jordan. The other one is Shaq.
I know.
But you got Olajuwon ahead of Shaq.
I do.
Oh, my. All right.
I do.
At number 6, I'm going Patrick Ewing.
Oh, 6. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, wow.
6, okay.
Patrick Ewing played in the Jordan era. That's number 1. Number 2, Patrick Ewing never had a number 2. He never had a true number 2. His whole career, he never truly had a number 2. Never did. You look at all these great players that have rings. Shaq had Kobe. Dream had Drexler. Russell had Cousy. You got a lot of guys that had number twos. If you want to take it to the era shit, Pip had Jordan. Jordan had Pip. Blah, blah, blah. LeBron had a couple of number twos. Patrick Ewing never had a number two. When
Never?
I look at no, Brett, are we going to revise history again?
He never had John Starks. He never had. I mean, come on, dude. Come on,
Brett. If you're
he never had number two.
Brett, if you're putting John Starks on the level of some of the other number twos that these other guys had, then you really got to revisit history, or maybe watch a little more hardwood classics.
I've watched them all.
Dude, John Starks was a number two for a very short time. You talk about stars and superstars and all this other stuff. John Starks was not a legitimate number two, buddy.
But he loved guarding Jordan. Jordan hated playing against him. Absolutely hated it.
I wouldn't say that. Jordan had his way with him most times.
Yeah, but he hated playing against him, dude. You can watch all the interviews.
He was a competitor, I get it, but not a consistent enough guy to be considered a true number two. Who was Jordan's number two?
Pippen.
Are we even going to put John Starks and Scottie Pippen in the same stratosphere? I hope not.
I mean, you got to look at. There's a number of players that could have been number two. I'm just naming off one player.
But
there's a number of players that could have been number two
in the Ewing era on the Knicks.
Yes, dude. You guys had a solid squad back in the 90s.
Solid squad that played great defense. He never had a consistent number two scorer. Never. You know when he got it? When he couldn't walk anymore. That's when they beefed up the offense. When they had LJ, when they had Camby, when they had Sprewell. Ewing was an old man by then. In his prime, he never had a legitimate number two scorer that you can count on night in and night out. The two best players on his team were John Starks and Charles Oakley. Charles Oakley averaged 10 points per game for his career.
Yeah, that was the third best player.
That was the third best player on the Knicks, or the second, depending what week it was.
All right, so you got 6 Ewing. 6, I'm going to go Mikan. I'm going to go Mikan. 7-time champ in the NBL, BAA, NBA. He was a scoring champ from the 47 to 52. Granted, I never saw him play, but the stats are there. The numbers are there. I'm still going to put him in the top 10. And every time we play against each other in NBA 2K, Mikan makes an absolute fool out of you. You can have 3 centers down there and a power forward, a nasty power forward, and Mikan still gets the board and puts it back.
I get it. He's the father to the centers, but again, I make the same argument that I make frequently and often. It's like the Deacon Jones argument in football. Deacon Jones ain't head slapping no big 300-pound all-pro offensive lineman. He'd get bodied. The evolution of the athlete counts. I respect him. I got him in my honorable mentions. But from a physicality level, I don't know how in the name of H, George Mikan is competing with any of the people that we've already mentioned. I just don't see it.
He's actually the guy, and I looked this up. He's actually a guy that created the skyhook, and Kareem perfected it.
Oh, no, yeah. Yeah.
He created the skyhook. You know, but like I said, I never saw him play, but numbers and numbers, he's a 7-time world champ. It is what it is. He's still in my top 10, even though I never saw him play. I would love to watch him play, but, you know, different era, different, you know, way the game is played, but numbers are there, and the championships are there. So nothing I can really say about that one.
At number 7, Moses Malone.
Yep. Same.
I feel that he's the perfect mix of scorer plus defender. when I think about the teams that he played on, I do think that he's a beneficiary of playing on some excellent teams. That always helps when you're in that championship struggle. Because I'm going to make a quick analogy before I go back to him. This guy was the Western Conference Patrick Ewing that never had the number 2. This guy was the Eastern Conference, the real Patrick Ewing. This guy won because Tim Duncan saved him. This guy couldn't walk when they gave him help. This guy always had help. But Moses Malone, talking about the player, the individual, the reason I put him above Robinson is because I feel that he would match up well. I think the best compliment I could give Moses Malone is that I feel that he could play in any era. And when you're talking about a guy that played years before, not like years and years before, the guy played in the 80s too, but I feel that he could have banged and hung with the 90s guys, the 80s guys, which is considered the golden era of centers. Moses Malone, the track record speaks for itself. And he does have a propensity for getting overshadowed in his particular organizations because of other players that were there. Because when you're on the 76ers and you play with a guy like Julius Erving, you're going to be second fiddle. It's that simple. But this guy was remarkable.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you as far as Moses being a 7. He was actually one of the first players to go from high school to the pros.
Mm-hmm.
He was the bridge. I love that about it. That started a trend. He's a 3-time MVP. Granted, he played on, great teams, but, the numbers kind of, speak for themselves. But the whole transition from high school to pros started the whole thing, and, I mean, you can call what it is, but, he started a trend, and that's what the game of basketball is supposed to be about, is starting something new, starting a trend.
The NBA backed it up for a while, and then, yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he started a trend, and I give him all the credit for that. And that's why he's on my top 10. And I 100% agree with you on him being number 7. 100%.
This dude, David Robinson, I got him at number 8. Dream teamer, along with fellow center Patrick Ewing. Those were the 2 main centers on that team. The Admiral, he started his NBA career a little late because of his military obligations. As I already alluded to prior to speaking about Moses, I made the analogy to Patrick Ewing because, similar to Patrick Ewing, the biggest issue that David Robinson had was similar. He never had that consistent number 2. When David Robinson tore his Achilles and Tim Duncan was drafted because they were so terrible that year without Robinson, Duncan wasn't just his number 2. Duncan immediately became the number 1, where Robinson became the number 2, which is an amazing blessing. And you even look at what's happening now. San Antonio hit another jackpot where they're going to get another big man that's going to be the center of the franchise in a few days for the draft. So definitely has his prints all over. Former league MVP, former scoring champion. He beat Shaquille O'Neal by decimal points one year. If my mind is correct.
95. It was 95.
I think it was 94. I think it was
95. It was 95.
I think it was 94.
He won the MVP in 95 when Hakeem was in his prime. He also won the Defensive Player of the Year in 1992. But 95 is what gets me. 95 is what gets me. He won the MVP in 95 when Hakeem, the Dream, was in his prime. That's what gets me.
Well, let's not forget, the Houston Rockets were a 6 seed in 1995. They weren't having a good season. They traded for Clyde Drexler and they clicked. Their better season was 94.
Yeah.
The 95 Rockets are the lowest seeded NBA team to ever win a championship. Getting back to the 94 season, David Robinson threw down 71 to win the scoring title that year. He narrowly edged Shaquille O'Neal 29.8 to 29.3 on the final day of the season. John Lucas was the coach. Wow, this is really throwing it back.
Wow.
That's when Shaq was a member of the Orlando Magic. So 29.3 points a game, Shaquille O'Neal still wasn't a superstar.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so what's your comment? Robert Parish, Boston Celtics, 1980s. In any other era, I think this guy maybe has more rings. You can thank Magic Johnson, Kareem, the West Coast Showtime Lakers for the reason why this man, Larry Bird, McHale, don't have more than 3 rings. In any other era, that is the Celtics decade. That just goes to show you how phenomenal those teams were. And to be honest, his importance to the league, number one, he went head-to-head with Kareem, which says a lot about the competitive value of it all. But it was, in my opinion, the most important rivalry in NBA history. I mean, they've rivaled in different eras, but the 80s rivalry between the Celtics and Lakers, to me, is the most important rivalry in the history of this league, because that rivalry put the league on its back and pushed it into a popularity that it has now.
Yeah. And then Jordan just
he took it global, and he had and the lane was wide open for him. You know, timing, we talked about this on other shows, timing is so vital to when these guys do and don't do what they do. But the Chief, Robert Parish, to me, one of the most underrated players in the league, because I think the reason why he gets overlooked is because he didn't do anything necessarily spectacular. He just did everything really good. And fundamentally sound through and through. And I'll be honest with you, the 3 championships help. Because when I look at some of these other guys on this list, maybe Nate Thurman could jump him, maybe Willis Reed can jump him. The reason why I keep him in this top 10, like I said, he played on, in my opinion, one of the most important NBA teams of all time. I'm talking about the 80s Celtics. Later in his career, he played mentor as an older player on the Michael Jordan Bulls. A lot of people forget that.
Exactly. I was going to say that. I was going to say that he won with the Bulls too.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that
he won for the Celtics and one of the Bulls.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that Parish won 3 with the Celtics, and I'd have to double check this, but I feel that he only won 1 with the Bulls. I'm not 100%. It was late. The point is that he was not a huge contributor in terms of anything on the court. He was a contributor in terms of up here as a mentor to the players. But, you know, like I remember when it was the 50 greatest players of all time back in that era. Seeing Robert Parish come out, and you're like, oh shit, he's still in the league. It threw a lot of people off. Dwight Howard is my number 10. First of all, who's your number 9?
My number 9 is Willis Reed.
Willis Reed,
2-time champ, Finals MVP. You know, the Game 7, coming back in entrance. That's a part of NBA history that that every young person should be inspired by. It's kind of hard not to put him on this list. For me. I mean, that was a historic moment, not only with the Knicks franchise, but just basketball in general. That showed that this guy had torn muscles and came back in Game 7. Granted, he only got 2 points, but still, he came back in. He showed heart. He showed compassion, and that's what the game is about. I'm going to put him on my top 10, no questions asked.
in my opinion, the third greatest New York Knick of all time, behind only Patrick Ewing at 1, Walt Clyde Frazier at 2. Walt Clyde Frazier, when I think about the 70s teams, he and Earl the Pearl Monroe were your two best scorers in terms of the backcourt. The backcourt was pretty sick. Earl Monroe also gets remembered for his days with the Bullets. But, Willis Reed, to me, was the greatest New York Knicks center before Patrick Ewing.
Mm-hmm.
He undeniably got him on my honorable mention, so I'm just going to put that there for a moment. No, he undeniably has his place, because when you look at the drought that has been the New York Knicks, I do want to reiterate one thing, and I don't like to take anything away from anyone. We recently lost Willis Reed this past year. I thought it would have been beautiful to see if the Knicks could have, 50 years later done it. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the cards. They beat legendary teams. Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain. Those are the Lakers that they beat. But the reason why I don't put Willis Reed in my top 10, and the reason why I don't have him above the next guy up, Patrick Ewing, in terms of Knick lore, is kind of what I already alluded to. You look at the 70s Knicks teams, you look at the 90s Knicks teams. The 70s Knicks teams were a lot more talented, especially on offense. Pat Riley tried to recreate the Bad Boys because he certainly wasn't going to recreate Showtime. And don't get me wrong, some of my most enjoyable times of being an NBA fan were in the 90s, watching those thugged out Knicks teams just beat the shit out of you if you even dare go to the rim. But one thing I will concede is that those Knicks teams lacked talent. What they never lacked was over here. They had the heart. But my God, I would have loved for those Knicks teams to have a couple of shooters that those 70s teams had. John Starks, loved him. And I said it a little bit ago, I just don't view him as a legit number 2. And I look at Ewing, and I think the best compliment that Ewing would receive from a lot of the 70s guys is that the 70s guys recognize him as the greatest Knick of all time. Ewing was humble. He's going to pass it back and be like, no. And I appreciate that about the class, paying homage to each other. On no planet would I put Willis Reed ahead of Patrick Ewing, but like I said, that's why we have opinions. Dwight Howard is my number 10. And this was tough for me because I was close to not putting him on this list. But I thought about the impact that he did make in the short time that he made it. In that regard, I'll put it to you like this. For the Orlando Magic, he actually will go down until somebody else knocks him out of this as the best center they ever had. And the reason I say that is because he was there longer than Shaq, and they both did something. And he did something that Shaq didn't do with the Magic. He actually won a finals game.
Yeah, true.
Against Kobe Bryant. Whereas Shaq got swept out by your boy Dream. Similar parts of their careers, both relatively young. Similar teams when you really think about it. Because one thing that Orlando did similarly, whether it was the Shaq version or the Dwight version, was that they had some serious sharpshooters.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Both teams were built similarly. If I had to give an edge on coaching for those two Magic teams that won the East, I give a slight edge to Stan Van Gundy over Brian Hill. Actually, more than a slight edge. I think Stan Van Gundy's a better coach in general. But team for team, I lean towards the Shaq Magic beating the Dwight Magic if they ever played, because that would be kind of like a cool little matchup if you could kind of make it happen. But I think the reason why he's not higher on this list, and the reason why he's probably not even on your top 10, is because of his attitude. He prevented himself from being great. He could have been great. I'm giving him this based on a short peak that I think was that damn good.
It's a very short peak.
If he's not on your top 10, I totally understand.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's definitely in my honorable mentions, top 15. I mean, he could have been better if he listened to Patrick Ewing, if he listened to his coaches, if he wasn't a freaking mm, like all he had to do was listen. All he had to do. That's all he had to do. My last spot in this list, number 10, is the Chief, Robert Parish. That's my final spot. He played 19 years in the league through the 80s and the 90s, the most brutal 2 eras you can ever possibly go through. And he did it. He did it well. 3-time champ, like you said. 3-time with the Celtics, 1 with the Bulls. They might have been part of the first. What do you call it? The 3-headed monster. You know what I mean? Like he was part of that. The McHale, the Bird, the Parish. He was part of that first.
Yeah, that's a big 3.
Yeah, the big 3. Exactly.
And in LA, the guys that they had to deal with, it was Magic, Jabbar, and Worthy.
Yeah,
that was the cool thing about it. Each big 3 was the same position.
Yeah.
Because when people talk about not exactly, but sort of exactly, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, from a physical standpoint, more or less the same height. Magic was a revolutionary in terms of a big point guard. A decade later, Scottie Pippen kind of revolutionized that position.
Yeah, point forward, whatever they call it now.
When you look at those Bulls teams, not to get too far away from the point, but it's pertinent to what we're saying. When you look at the Bulls teams in the 90s, similar to the Lakers teams in the 80s, their ball handler was a big dude because Scottie essentially ran the offense. He was the facilitator in a lot of ways. Because when you look at those Bulls teams, they didn't have a true point guard. They really didn't. They never really did. They had guys that were like defensive specialists, or they had guys that were like 3-point specialists that were listed as point guards. But Steve Kerr, phenomenal shooter, John Paxson, phenomenal shooter, those dudes weren't necessarily facilitators. The ball handler on those teams was Scottie Pippen.
Yeah, I can see that.
And not like I said, we're not talking about forwards, but the reason we brought this up is because we were talking about big men, big point guards, the depth of this whole rivalry, Celtics Lakers. And it started with Bird and Magic. That those were the guys that the stories were about, but these were the unsung guys, the McHales, the Parishes, the Worthies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, man, I said on this show, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the 2nd greatest basketball player of all time. But a lot of people will say that Magic Johnson is the greatest Laker. So you know what I mean? And it's even with, I was getting in my irritation level with you about the Shaq and Kobe thing. But it's similar. It's similar. It actually is similar. It's a different era, but, some people feel that there's so many different ways of grading players because –
Oh, I know. Different eras. Everything, the way the game is played, different rules. It's so difficult nowadays to really assess a game or assess a player. You know what I mean? It's just because you really don't know what you're gonna get. Right now, yes, Joker, MVP, Finals MVP. The guy put up phenomenal numbers this whole postseason. But who did he really play against?
Well,
he played against an 8 seed. Then he played against another 8 seed in the finals.
Well, 7 and an 8. 7 and an 8. But
you know what I mean? It's like, who did they really play against? And the numbers are so, I don't want to say inflated, but they're tainted.
I don't like that word. I don't like that word, tainted. This is my thing. No, they're not tainted. This is my thing. That 8 seed that he beat in the finals beat the 1 seed in the East. They earned their way there.
I know that.
It wasn't
but at the end of the day, he still beat an 8 seed.
That's not fair. That's not fair. No. That's not even slightly fair. That's not fair. That's not fair. Because you had to get there by beating other high-seeded teams. So to say that they're not better than some of the teams they beat that were higher seeded, that's not fair. Are the Lakers at 7 and the Grizzlies at 2? Did anybody really think the Grizzlies were going to beat them? I certainly didn't.
I mean, that's your opinion. I picked the Lakers to lose in the first round.
I didn't. I certainly didn't. Oddly enough, the Minnesota Timberwolves gave the Denver Nuggets the hardest time, and that was their first opponent. You know,
it's so difficult now.
Something that needs to be taken into consideration. The game
is played and everything.
Something that needs to be taken into consideration. I don't think you could put the same kind of onus on where a team's ranked in the playoffs in today's NBA, when a lot of teams are not worried about having home court to begin with. They're worried about being healthy. Mm-hmm. So, like, when you look at 8 seed Miami making the Eastern Conference Finals, 7 seed Los Angeles making the Western Conference Finals. No, I didn't have Miami making it far. Nobody did. But I did have the Lakers going to the Western Conference Finals off the rip. That I did predict. And that was a 7 seed. You know, so, you know, today's NBA, I don't view it in the same way that, you know, you have rest minutes. You have all these guys missing games. I think it's more about getting in position for the playoffs. And, okay, here's another one. The Golden State Warriors were number 6, and they beat the number 3 Kings this year. Did anybody think the Kings were going to beat them? I certainly didn't.
I mean, that was a good series, though. That was a really good series.
It was a good series. But you get where I'm going? You taking LeBron, and any team with LeBron and Steph on, I'm taking over whoever the hell's the higher seed more times than not. More times than not. They were a 6 and a 7. Yes, Miami shocked the basketball world. Nobody saw that shit coming. They lost a play-in game. You know, like, nobody saw that coming. But, you know, it was the perfect storm of things to go their way. Looking back at when the playoffs started, I was, like, so happy that the Heat beat the Bucks, because what did I say on all those shows before the playoffs? We could beat the Celtics. We can beat the Cavs. I don't want to see Milwaukee. I don't want to see. I kept saying that. I wished for Miami, and then we lost. And then they beat the Celtics.
Yeah.
So I guess I had one thing right. The Celtics weren't as good as everybody thought.
Well, I mean, today now, I mean, the game is played completely different compared to the 90s. You know, like, if you had a 1 and 8 seed playing against you in the first round, I mean, it was a 1 in a million shot that 8 seed was going to win. And that was a 5-game series back then.
In that era of basketball, the New York Knicks 1999, the Denver Nuggets 1994. Those are the only 2 8 seeds in the 90s, or basically any other time that you could really look into that. I mean, years later, the Bulls lost to the Heat, if I'm not mistaken. And the Bulls were a 1 seed, but that was also when Derrick Rose was injured.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the same year. But the point I'm making is you don't see it happen almost ever.
Hardly.
No, but you're going to see it happen more often. That I am going to say.
Oh, nowadays, yeah, you will. Nowadays.
But you know, and one of the biggest reasons, like why I have so much trouble ranking players in general when compared to some of these other guys from this era of basketball, is that, to your point, the game is played a lot different. But also my issue is rules are still supposed to be rules. When did not calling traveling become so accepted?
Come on.
When did not calling illegal screens become so accepted.
That's a whole nother topic, dude. That's a whole nother show.
No, it's here, and we're talking about it because you said the game's different. These are viable, valid points.
No, I know.
The Jimmy Butler thing, the Jimmy Butler play. He kicks out. Nobody on that team touches him. They even reviewed it, and they still put him on the free throw line. This is a league. This is a league that has sent a referee to prison. And
I know. For gambling. Yeah, I know.
It's a terrible look. It's a terrible look on so many levels. And I got news for you, dude. These are some of the many reasons why the NBA ratings are on the bottom, because Skip Bayless is someone that I can't friggin' stand. But one thing that I will agree with him, because he was actually right about this. He was with Shannon Sharp on Shannon's last show or second to last show, talking about how horrible the Denver Nuggets played in Game 5, but still won the damn game.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you think about the NBA Finals and the richness of this, so many of these players contribute to the richness of what the Finals means. You're thinking about Michael Jordan finishing against the Lakers. You're thinking about Magic Johnson as a rookie beating the mighty 76ers without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You're thinking about Larry Bird with the towel, you know, Isaiah Thomas. You know, you're thinking about
I know.
a lot
of that's how we grew up, though. That's how we grew up.
But even if you want to apply it to newer stuff, you're thinking of the Spurs. That was excellence. Kobe and Shaq. That was excellence.
Detroit Pistons.
The second run of the Bad Boys, the new Bad Boys with Wallace. Yeah. You know, the Miami Heat had a couple of runs, pre-LeBron, post-LeBron, both excellent teams. Dallas Mavericks was a feel-good when you got to see Dirk and J. Kidd win together. That was a feel-good one. Everybody rooting for that. You saw super teams like a Golden State Warriors, pre-KD, post-KD, you know, they won with them, they won without them. KD hasn't won shit without Golden State. They've won without them. You know, we saw the big three with Boston. Short-lived. They got old, and Miami kicked their ass after that. But I guess the point I'm making is that when you talk about all these different eras that we just spit on, this is all types of excellence. What I saw in Game 5 of the NBA Finals was the furthest thing from excellence. I don't want to take nothing away from Jokic. I think the guy is phenomenal, and he's going to be one of the best at that center position. But quite frankly, there's a lot of things the NBA lacks, but I'm just going to keep it a buck. I think the NBA lacks heart. You got it.
They lack on a lot of things. Number one, officiating. Number two, discipline. Hence John Moran. That's a whole other topic, but he should have been suspended for a whole year for that.
Well, Adam Silver has no balls, and I'm going to say it right here.
Yeah, no, he should.
It's hard to make Roger Goodell look good, but he's doing a good job of it.
Yeah, it's like, you know, with these pro athletes now, you know, involving guns, drugs, prostitution, whatever the case may be, these guys don't get punished. They get fined. Big fucking deal. You know what I mean? Like, oh, here's 25 grand. Sure, take it. They get punished? No. They lose their jobs? No. If we were to do that in our profession, we would lose our jobs.
Well, the thing is,
why don't they? Why don't they?
That's another thing to take into consideration because, like, you know, it's the brand. If everyday people struggle to relate to your brand is gonna fail. And I think that is a big issue for the NBA. There's a lot of issues for the NBA, but the NBA is not that far away from being what it was pre-Jordan era when they had that huge cocaine problem, And a lot of people were turned off with the NBA back then. We're running out of
Oh,
time. Until
Jordan
next,
admitted it.
I'm Richie. He's Brett.